Hello, and welcome to the official podcast of the Cleveland International Film Festival, SIF Speaks, sponsored by Wayside Furniture. I'm Dee Perry, and I'm joined by my producer and co-host, Aaron Spears. And Aaron, Cops and Robbers Story is the film we're talking about on this edition of the podcast, and despite the title, it is not your average police procedural.
It is certainly not, Dee. It is a documentary feature that introduces us to retired NYPD officer who served with distinction for 21 years, then shocked the whole city when he revealed his troubled past.
It was a really compelling film to watch, and joining us now to talk about it are the film's director, Ilinka Kalugarianu, and the featured subject, Corey Pegis. How would you describe the film, A Cops and Robbers Story, to someone who doesn't know anything about you or the film?
Oh, well, I would describe the film "A Cops and Robbers Story" as a high-end transformational story. It's about a misguided kid that was young, was dabbling in the streets, did a lot of crazy things, sold drugs, carried guns, shot at people and stuff, and then had this wonderful arc of transformation by changing his life by going into the military and then into the police department, rising to the executive level of the police department along the way, getting his bachelor's, his master's, was a professor at two different colleges. So this is a very feel-good story for all ethnicities and all walks of life, and especially people in low socioeconomic neighborhoods that's thinking that they can't succeed because they're stuck in a rut.
Good summation.
I think I wanted to ask, since most viewers presumably will be meeting Corey for the first time, you structured the beginning of your film as an introduction to Corey and his life. How did you go about scripting what parts of the bio or how to introduce Corey throughout the narrative of the film?
It's all part of the 3-year process that working on this film has been understanding his story. For the first 2 years, we were recording interviews, and that's kind of my process in approaching a new story, is to interview all the characters involved in the story and understand its many facets, its chronology, its layers, and then along the way understand how to best tell the story. And as you see in the film, we use different mediums, especially when it comes to talking about Corey's past and immersing the audience in Corey's past. So it all came along the way, and of course, the biggest battle was once we were in the edit with all this material, all these interviews, everything that we shot. Exactly how do we introduce Corey? What does the audience need to know so that they embark on this story? And because Corey's life journey is so amazing, and it takes you, on across two sides of the law, and there's so many events and so much drama. So it's all been a process of kind of understanding in what order to say it and how to take the audience on this exciting journey, which I hope we succeeded to some extent.
I was curious how you two got connected. What led you to know Corey's story and want to make a film about it?
Well, we were doing research for a documentary series, and both myself and the producer on the Cops and Robbers Story, we came across Corey's story in a newspaper article. I mean, it was just a short thing, and I remember we were both in the office. We read it, we stopped, looked at each other, and said, "Forget about the series. This is a feature film." And I think what grabbed me instantly when I read about Corey and I heard about him was how he just defies stereotypes and preconceptions and all these received ideas and images we have of what a cop is, what they should look like, what their background should be. And it was so captivating that I think just a few days we contacted Corey. We had our first conversations on Skype, and then this beautiful friendship started, right, Corey?
Exactly. Yeah.
And speaking of friendships, Corey, one of the things that grabbed me about the film is the friendships that you have. We meet the adult versions of your childhood friends early in the film, and I wanted to have you talk about what hanging with those guys gave you that you needed when you were a child and an adult.
Well, if you saw the film, then you know that I grew up with 5 sisters. I didn't have no brothers. So the 5 amigos, me and the other 4, like we became a brotherhood, and we bonded. And it wasn't just selling drugs. We bonded. Like, I know their families. They was at my house. We were really, really good friends. It wasn't like I met them in the park and that was it. No, as a matter of fact, Smooth, his mom just passed away like maybe a month and a half ago. June, his Dre, his mom just passed away like a year ago. Like we've been friends over 40 something years. And this is a real friendship. It wasn't made up. And so they was like the brothers that I didn't have, you know. And we have a bond to this day. And they kept me grounded like throughout life, whatever I did. I could remember when I went into the police academy and I was a cop. June was in jail. June got locked up in Baltimore. And no, I was still in the military. June would send me letters and from jail in Baltimore, and I was in the military, and he would be like, yo, you know, they call me Boo. He was like, yo, Boo, yo, you did it, man. We proud of you. You don't want this, man. Yo, stay on the straight and narrow, man. We so proud of you. You made it. So we've always had a special bond. It was just for 21 years, I really couldn't be with them the way I wanted to be because they were convicted felons, most of them. But you know, as soon as I retired, it was like back in the saddle.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I really thought, just because you brought up this theme and it's so dear to my heart, this theme of their friendship, that was something that like really really grabbed me and brought me closer to Corey's story. And just this friendship is so beautiful, and the fact that it lasted for throughout their life. They were kids, and I spent so much time with Corey, and they're still together, they're still hanging out. They were with him, when everything kind of exploded, after he retired. They were still with him when his cop friends turned their back to him. So I thought it's such a remarkable thing, and also it's a way to kind of challenge these preconceptions that we have about the world that Corey grew up in. That's Jamaica, Queens in the 80s. Some people very easily reduced to crime and poverty, but this community feeling and how they supported each other and this bond was just amazing. I don't have friends since I was that young, so it's just like.
Elika, I wanted to ask you another kind of structural question about the film, because I realized as a filmmaker, you've now fooled me twice with your dramatic recreations. So with your first feature documentary, Chuck Norris versus Communism, I was probably about a third of the way through before I realized, oh, these are recreations here. And then you got me again with this one. I think it was maybe the second scene when we saw young Corey, where I was like, oh, okay, she's doing this again. They are so smooth the way you use them. What was your decision-making process for what parts should be recreated and then how expansive to use it? Because I think with Chuck Norris versus Communism, it was a lot more recreations than this one. Mm-hmm. But if you could speak to that kind of decision-making process, but then also how you direct that versus the documentary sections as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, part of that whole process of understanding how to tell the story, and I like to always work with this kind of hybrid ways of storytelling, but they have to serve whatever story I'm telling at that point. And with Corey, there was this big part of his life that happened such a long time ago, and it was important and such a key moment that determined all the steps that came afterwards, and also spoke about his background. And I really wanted to find a way to immerse the audience in that time, in the 80s, a young boy growing up in Jamaica, Queens. And this time, in this film, we decided to focus these dramatizations on a moment in his life. It was just this life-changing, brief second that combined luck or fate or destiny, but also all these amazing qualities and potential that he had because he made a choice after luck kind of helped him be able to make that choice. And the way that we worked on these dramatizations was very collaborative from the beginning. I told Corey that I want to focus on that day in his life, and we worked together on the script with Corey, with his friends as well. We had a few sessions where we brainstormed and we went through that day, and it was great to kind of see how all of them remembered it and what their perspective was. So that was like a first level of collaboration and brainstorming, and then it was a second stage once we cast the parts, and again we tried to not to work with professional actors. Similar to Chuck Norris versus Communism, there was a big contingent of non-actors, and it was people that to some extent shared parts of Corey's story and could connect to what we were trying to reconstruct and dramatize. And that was the second layer of brainstorming and collaboration and finding the scenes and the dialogue and giving that authenticity. Because of course I didn't grow up in 80s Jamaica, Queens, and I really, I needed everyone on the team to bring in their personal experiences, and obviously with Corey being the main one.
And I too was fooled for a bit by the dramatization, but more because young Corey's face looked a lot like what older Corey morphed into. And in the closing credits, I saw why. So I wanted to have you, Corey, talk about how it felt to have your own son, Corey Jr., play you in the recreation of your time as a teenager dealing drugs.
So I can't take credit for it. Alinka really, really was the catalyst for us. I thought she was totally out of her mind by having my son play me, because I'm like, he's not an actor. He don't know how to act. And to just give her the credit, she flew him. He lives in Georgia. She flew him up to New York for like a 15-day boot camp. First of all, she had him audition like over a Skype to read something. She sent him something, and she was like, "Okay, I think he got it. We're gonna fly him in." And she put him through a boot camp, like a real boot camp, because I was like taking him to where she was, and he was there like 12, 14, 15 hours a day, just him, her, and the producer, and she was just drilling him and drilling him. She wouldn't let me come in or whatever, just honing his skills. And after the 2 weeks, she was like, "He got it. He's going to play you." I literally had nothing to do with it. I was like chomping at the bits to see the rehearsals and everything. She wouldn't let me see anything. She wouldn't even let me come on set when he was like, when you see like those reenactments, I couldn't even be there. She just like really wanted me to see this develop on screen. She would just keep teasing me by telling me, "He's doing a great job. I'm telling you, he got it. He's doing good." And I'm like, "Well, I want to see." And she wouldn't even let me come in. She had like bodyguards, wouldn't even let me come on. But
You're making me sound like some
yeah, she was
dictator.
definitely dictating it. But as far as how it made me feel emotionally, I mean, I think anybody that has a good relationship with their child, and then they're getting ready to have like a biopic about them, would love for their child to emulate them and play them. So for me, it was definitely a proud papa moment to see him, on the screen, and the day that she had me view it, me and him and her, and do my right hand man. It was just like amazing. I really thought like the most potent scene of that whole documentary is in the van, when he's in the van,
Right.
because there's really no talking at all, and it was just like him just really being an actor, and I was just like amazed that like he could do this. So I'm very proud of him for what he has done, and I thank Alinka for that. And he's had some audition opportunities for some because of this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it
That's
was
very
good.
cool.
Well, he's very
Yeah, he
talented.
is. And you got the best out of him too.
It wasn't such a harsh boot camp. Like you made it sound like it was this. We did have a lot of fun though rehearsing, and especially with also the other actors, and Junior did amazingly. So
Elenka, I was interested in how you presented the interviews with Corey's family and friends. They were all set up in a space with studio lighting and a gray textured background. And it seemed, I mean, it wasn't off-putting, but it did seem somewhat formal. I was wondering why you chose that approach.
well, the reason why I chose to do all the interviews in the same setting was that I knew we were going to talk to people from so many parts of Corey's life and different times, different layers of the story, family, friends, cops, friends, foes. And I felt like that would stand the risk. If we do it in all their personal settings, it was going to become very chaotic. And what we really wanted to do was to really focus on Corey's journey and give that that story a frame, and that's what this studio setting became, a frame for telling that story and just focusing on that one story. And also I felt like it gave it, hopefully it made it feel like a special occasion, for storytelling, where we each sit in this chair, and all this kind of effort has been made around it, from the part of the crew, but also from the part of the people talking, because they came all that way, they dressed up, And they did it because they really wanted to talk and tell that story. So I feel like that frame creates that sort of effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Something else I noticed with your two feature films, was that they've also been short films, and I'm always fascinated with documentaries and when you're filming, when you're going to production, like when you know the documentary is done. So it seemed like you had your short films done, and something clicked in you with these stories. You're like, there's more here. What was it about these stories that really captured your imagination that you were like, nope, there's a feature here. We got to keep going with these.
I think somehow for me shorts are part of the process of telling a story, and it's such a long journey telling a feature. And with Corey's life journey, I knew it was going to be a feature from the beginning. But it's such a long journey, and there comes a moment where you've shot for such a long time, you spoke with so many people. Putting it into a short, it's really a way to focus your mind and see, what are the challenges of this story, and if when it does become a feature, when it will become a feature, what problems will I need to solve? And when you work on the short, those really stand out. Um, and also it's a way to put the story out there and see how people react. And for both of these shorts, it was great because again, you work on on a story for such a long time, and you're with a small crew, and you don't know what you're doing for such a long time. And putting the short out is a way to connect with your audience for the first time and see, is there an audience for this story? What are they saying? And every time with both shorts, people were saying, "Oh, I wish this was a short. This was a feature. That we need to know more." And that's another thing. It's a little bit of a test of how are people receiving the story. Do they want to hear more? And connecting with the audience from that point.
Nice.
And Corey, there is a point in the film when you're talking about your years as a police officer, and you say, I really conditioned my mind not to look back. And I wondered when I heard that statement because it also seemed like you struggled with holding back the truth about your past, especially in situations where you thought it might help the community you were serving. So, was it both? Were you sort of, I don't know, compartmentalizing when you were working as a police officer?
Well, it was a little bit of both. I wanted to announce to the world that like this is what I did and I changed my life, but it's not like fashionable being the police executive saying I sold drugs and carry guns. It don't work. And I knew that the hierarchy, you gotta understand, like policing is it's messed up. The whole criminal justice system in America is messed up. It's slated against black and brown communities. I actually think it needs to be an atomic bomb to blow it up and start to build it up. It started with slave patrol, so that's all we need to really know. And so the hierarchy, they would never understand my condition because most people in affluent places or like good jobs, they look down on people in the low socioeconomic areas and they say, hey, like you did something, that's who you are to the end of the time. And meanwhile, I'm like peeling back all these different layers, and they don't even know they're sitting in a room in these high meetings with the police commissioner in New York City, and I done shot people, I done did all this crazy stuff, but I couldn't disclose this stuff. And then the other side was like wanting to tell the community. So you see, Alinka even put bits and pieces in the documentary where I would be talking to community members saying, hey, I grew up in neighborhoods like this. I did some of these things, but I couldn't outright say it. But so I always knew how to toe the line. I knew where the power was. The power was at the top. So I was trying to get as much power as I could because that's when I could change things. So everywhere I went, the more power I got, the more change that I could affect. So I had to like balance it, like don't talk too much. But then once I retired, it was like take the lid off. I'm telling the world.
Right. And there was another thing that struck me. I think it was your cousins who were talking about when you retired. They were saying that you were having a problem with it because you loved being a police officer. Was that accurate, or was it a means to an end for you?
Hey, let me tell you, I laugh every time I see that part. You talk about my cousin Val and
Yeah.
Cookie. They
Hmm.
said I love being a police officer. I did see that when she said that. Yeah, I did. I mean, I got a house, two cars, and a white picket fence. Who wouldn't want to live the American dream? I really like engaging people, and actually helping people. But it wasn't like the end all be all. The day I got injured, and I asked the doctor, "Can I be a cop again?" He said, "No." I told my wife, "Bring my laptop to the hospital," and I started writing my memoir. So it was just like, all right, now I got to find out another hustle because I'm just a natural hustler. So I'm trying to hustle Hollywood now. So the hustle just continues. It just goes on and on. So I did really like my job. It was very rewarding. I got something out of it. It was mind stimulating. It was good, just like trying to help people. So it was good, and just being on the other side, I was amazed my entire career, like pinching myself every day, going from working for this violent drug conglomerate to being a commanding officer in some of the most prestigious positions in the NYPD. So I did love it, but I wasn't like going crazy. I asked two questions: Can I be a cop again, and can I play golf? And the doctor said you could keep playing golf, you could probably find another profession. So as long as I could play golf, it was like okay, all good.
Well, we see a little bit in the film when your memoir comes out, and kind of your reaction. There's a scene I think in a bookstore when you're talking to the crowd and presenting your memoir there. What's your reaction now that your story is on film and then the film is out there and seen in audiences? What's been your feelings in reaction to the film?
Well, like Lincoln said, it was a 3-year journey. So for me, it was just like my book was a 2-year process. This film was a 3-year process. It's just about getting feedback. If it's good, bad, or indifference, it doesn't even really matter to me. I just want to get feedback because we worked really, really hard. Alinka put blood, sweat, and tears. And what y'all don't know is like with that basketball court scene, it was like 20 below zero with wind chill factor, and y'all don't even realize it. And the Linker's like, do another take, do another take. It was so cold. Like everybody, like we went through the whole process, and so after the 3-year journey, it's like I just want feedback, and I love getting feedback from the people. And overwhelmingly, the feedback is very positive. Like everybody in the world needs to see this film, and that's pretty much the feedback. I haven't gotten, and on the blogs you hear a couple of like crazy comments, but overwhelmingly, it's just about I just want to tell my story, and it's not about like we ain't gonna be billionaires off this. For me, it's just like if we could help one or two kids, like when I wrote my book, I would get like emails from Germany and stuff like kids saying, "Hey, I used to sell drugs. Reading your book changed my life." That's really
Wow.
that was the whole premise of it. So, having the book was nice, but having a visual is even better because now people
Yeah.
actually see who the person is.
And Alenka, besides all the work on set as the director, you're also listed as the sole editor for the film. And I was curious, first of all, if you sought out any other input on earlier drafts of the film before the final cut, and if you, as editor, had to get rid of things that you, as director, love.
Yes, always. And and I just want to say that wasn't the plan. I always like to work with another editor. I edit, and I usually do a first assembly just to kind of put my thoughts on paper, as it were, for the collaborators. This time, it so happened that I worked with edit consultants, so we would have. Again, it's in a similar way. I would work on an assembly, and then we would have this very intensive session. So it wasn't just me because that can just make you go nuts. Exactly. When you have to fight all your other personalities because you're the interviewer, you really like that question, and then you got that beautiful shot when you were doing the dramatization. Yeah, it can drive you nuts. But it was a process of collaboration as well, and working with consulting editors and also all the partners on the film, and just getting as much feedback as possible, and because always for me the most important thing is to do justice to the story and to make sure that Corey's journey really comes out, and takes people on an engaging journey.
Corey, I wanted to ask, since the camera stopped rolling on this film, your story's out there, you're talking about feedback. I'd kind of like to get your feedback on what has happened in the past year with movements to defund the police, to refund the police. You just mentioned, the idea of kind of just an atomic bomb needs to be dropped on it and just build over from scratch. So I was kind of wondering if we could get your feedback on what you think the ideal role then of police in our modern society would be. That's probably too big of a question for the time we have here, but at least some of your thoughts there on that, I'd be really curious to hear.
Yeah, that's great. That's my wheelhouse. I speak about this every day in TV and news magazines. But yeah. So, and for me, in a perfect world, police would just really respond to the seven major crimes like rape, robbery, murder, burglary, stolen cars. Stuff like that. The war on drugs we've been doing since the Reagan era. It's not working. It's never gonna work. You can't, arrest your way out of drug addiction. The only thing you can do is education, counseling, and treatment. Those are the only three things. But American policing, we want to keep locking up drug addicts. It doesn't work. So, dealing with emotionally disturbed persons, you see every time a cop go to one of these jobs with somebody in a mental state and kill them, I actually feel really, of course, I feel bad for the dead person, but I really feel bad for the cop because the cop is not really trained and equipped to deal with that. You go to academy for 6 months, you get driver's training, firearms training, dealing with emotions disturbed, domestic violence, drug use. You get all of that training, and then you got to be the master of all, but not really the master of one. And so, you look at Oregon. Oregon has this program called Cahoots for over 25 years. Every time there's a mental health call, they send mental health counselors there. And then, ironically, in 25 years, they haven't had one police shooting. Like, you don't have to recreate the wheel. This is what we shouldn't be sending cops. Oh, it's like putting Michael Jordan in a hockey uniform and telling him to play hockey after three practices. Like, he can't play hockey. Cops can't deal with these mental shit. So, like, the whole I don't like defunding because some people take defunding and think they want to abolish police. Well, nobody wants to abolish, but it could be restructured, demilitarization, all of that stuff. But you're gonna have to pay me a lot of money if I keep talking about this. My
I see.
consultant fees are very high. I think I gave you enough on that.
But I did want to go in another direction with the thought that your daughter and your nephew became police officers. Are they're still working in that field? So how do you feel about that? What are your fears and hopes for them?
Well, I really don't have fears because as police officers, you can't go out every day thinking somebody's going to die. You're going to die. It's going to be your last day in patrol. We are really religiously grounded. So I truly believe that, like, when it's your time, it's your time. It's going to happen. That's what it is. We could try to prevent as much as we can. But when the GOD call you, that's what it is. So that's how I live my life. And my nephew is a detective and my daughter's a cop. They both have like 10 or 12 years on the job and they're doing very well. And I'm happy that they have, followed the tradition of me along with a few other family members because we need people in the position. I believe their heart is in the right place. I employ all young kids, all ethnicities to get on the job because as long as we have good cops, I don't care if they're black, white, green, or purple. If a green cop came to my house, all I want them to do is treat me with respect. And that's all it's about. I'm so off the black white issue with policing. I'm so off it because I could set names some black cops I don't want to come to my house, some white cops I don't want to. I just want good police officers coming to my house. And that's my issue and agenda, what I'm trying to push out there. As long as cops are coming with a good mindset and to do the right thing, nobody in America really cares what your color is if as long as you're going to treat them with respect. That's it. You got to understand most people have like one or maybe two engagements with a cop in their entire life. So what cops got to understand is that one time, that impression that you get, you're representing the entire police force in the world. That's how they look. Because one cop, when you do something wrong, Eric Garner gets killed or George Floyd, the cop in Boise, Idaho has to deal with that. It's like, oh, you cops killed this guy over here. Doctors kill people every day. While we're talking right now, emergency rooms, they're killing people while malpractice. But nobody hate doctors. But the cop job is so important and imperative to America or to the world. Like, you have to always, what I tell cops is shoot 100. What I mean is you got to give them your best every single time. I don't care if you've been on that same job 100 times because that 100th time might be the time where you slip and it could be a disaster. So it's a tough job. It's a tough job, but we need people that's going to do the right thing or go to McDonald's because they're always hiring.
Like, as we're wrapping up here, I wanted to ask you what you as a as a human, but as a filmmaker, took away from documenting Corey's story, but then also what you're hoping audiences are going to take away from your documentation of Corey's story?
Well, I think on a personal level, what I really resonated with from Corey's story is his struggle with dueling identities and his refusal to erase parts of himself that were important to him, but to other people were controversial or even damning if we're thinking about the NYPD. And I think whether it was his style or the way he spoke or his friendships, all these things that in the NYPD were creating problems for him, he found a way to force them into this new identity that he was making. So I always found that so admirable, just on a personal level, as a role model. And then, on the bigger themes of the film, what I would really hope is that, when people watch this film, they can start some conversations about criminal justice and who gets a second chance. I think Corey's story really speaks about that, like who gets a second chance at life. About conversations about the crisis in policing, and Corey just spoke about that at length, and different ways to police. And I really hope that the film challenges stereotypes that we have about what a cop should be, what policing should be, what its goals should be. So I think in the best case scenario, I would like people to watch the film and then just leave and have all these questions and discussions as fiery as possible.
I like it. And Corey, I have a last question for you, which is that in the film, one of the narratives is that you never stop improving and looking for that next thing to accomplish. And we're all curious, at this moment in time, what is your next thing?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I always, I have progressed my entire life. And like I said, like right now, I'm just really I'm trying to get my foot into Hollywood because I think that I have something to offer, you know, and obviously in the police space in Hollywood because, it's always like the cop ends up being corrupt. They don't even have stories of like what Alenko shot about. Like this cop that did bad things and he ends up being a good guy. It's usually a cop that was really good. He becomes a cop and then he's training that he's a bad guy. And so, I'm trying to really get my foot out there. I think I have something to offer there. But, Alenka and Mara's it's not really gonna be hard for me because once the film is released, I'm pretty sure my phone will be ringing a few times. They're doing it. So that's the next goal for me. And obviously speaking, to many kids as I can possibly speak to, college campuses and high schools around the country, which I already do. That's really it. I just want to spread my message. That's just what it is. And I don't want to
It's
work for nobody else again after that 21-year experience.
That's a good goal.
Yeah.
Thank you both. It was really wonderful watching the film and talking to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
We've been talking with Corey Pagis and with Alenka Kalugarianu. Alenka is the director, and Corey is the featured subject of the documentary A Cops and Robbers Story. You can get more details about that film when you log on to the SIF website, clevelandfilm.org. I'm Dee Perry.
And I'm Aaron Spears.
We want to thank our sponsor for this podcast, Wayside Furniture, being it local since 1937. We also want to remind you that you can support your local film festival at this time. Please consider a donation to the SIF Challenge Match presented by Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. Our goal is to reach $145,000 this year to support the future of our festival, and we're so grateful for any amount you're able to contribute. To donate, please visit clevelandfilm.org. And thank you for listening to SIF Speaks.